Hi, everyone. We're going to get started. So first of all, thanks for joining us. And let me lower this. Okay. My name is Christine Tsai, and I'm very excited to introduce our Marketing Talks at Google speaker today, Matt Bailey. He's actually fresh from SES San Jose. That's where he just came from, having spoken on another panel alongside Avinash Kaushik. Hope I got his name right, who some of you might know from Google Analytics. And let me see. Matt is the president and founder of SiteLogic Marketing. He actually knows Brett back from when Google Analytics used to be called Urchin. So he actually sends his apologies. He couldn't be here to introduce you himself. But Matt's here to regale us with analytics according to Captain Kirk. I'm actually pretty intrigued by this, even though I'm not a big Star Trek fan. But he'll share his insights into analytics and how the original Star Trek series explains many of the principles behind analytics and understanding visitor motivations, segments, and website analysis. And then finally, how do you make all of that actionable? So if you're like me, whether or not you're a Star Trek fan, I'm sure this will be a treat for you. So without further ado, may I welcome Matt Bailey.
Really, this presentation is built out of training on what I would call the front lines. I do a lot of training for the search engine strategy shows. I do a lot of training for the Direct Marketing Association. And really, I would describe myself as being on the front lines with companies who either they don't have any analytics at all, or they have an incredibly old version of web trends that they got from someone's nephew. They don't know what to do with it. They don't understand it. And when they open up the dashboard, they freeze because they just don't understand what to do with it. So this presentation is really a product of trying to introduce to a business owner or to a marketing manager, here's what you need to understand about analytics. Here's the potential for what it can do for you. And hopefully, here's some methods that you can take to help understand it. So a lot of this may seem really basic out of the box, but please remember that where I say on the front lines, this is earth-shattering stuff. They're not getting this from anywhere, and Avinash has been such a great evangelist of getting the word out, helping people understand how easy Google Analytics are to use, but really it is a message that needs to get out more and more and to a much wider audience. Because in general, people are just mystified about this subject, and really, they're intimidated by it. The very first thing that we have to explain to people is that there is no such thing as accuracy. This comes out of question after question after question of how do I know for sure these are the right visitors, that this analytics package is showing me exactly who came to my site. And there are so many factors that can ruin that. And then the follow-up question is, why does Google Analytics tell me one number, but Omniture tells me another number? And Core Metrics tells me another number. And so the first thing people realize is not only is there no consistency among analytics programs, that how do we even know what number is right? And so the very first thing we have to get out of people's heads is that there is no source of accuracy. There's no clear source because every analytics program operates differently. And so we have to get that out of our heads. The best quote that I heard was from John Marshall, who founded ClickTracks. When I asked him, what makes ClickTracks more accurate than anybody else? And he stopped me. He says, that's a good question. He says, but what we like to sell ourselves as is being less inaccurate than everybody else. And that's really what analytics is all about, is trying to be less inaccurate and trying to find what's going on in your website. So the first thing we have to talk to people about is, what should you be measuring? What are some of the important things to draw out of the data? And we start with really more of a comfortable landing spot. We get into unique visitors. The only way you can track unique visitors is by using JavaScript on the tags and also by using cookies. Those are the only two ways that you can get this information. If you aren't using JavaScript tagging or cookies, then you are just going to have visits. You're just going to have sessions because you're not uniquely identifying the people that come to your site. Now again, this is full of holes as well because anyone who deletes their cookies, they show up as unique visitors again. And so this is one of the principles why we can't ever get to very accurate data. There's always changes going on. So beyond that, we have to help people also understand that cookies aren't necessarily a bad thing. The first-party cookies, those are fine. Those are the cookies that if I come to Google, I get a cookie on my browser from Google. Now, if I go to a site like CBS Sportsline and there are ads on the side for Toyota, and then I get a cookie from Toyota, even though I'm not on the Toyota site, I'm on the CBS Sportsline site. That is a third-party cookie. Those are the ones that are used for ad tracking. That's also the ones that have had some issues in security, and those are usually the ones that browsers will block. So it's the third-party cookies that get the bad name when it comes to analytics and privacy and things like that. But the first-party cookies are the ones that help you uniquely identify a person, where they came from, who they are, and how often they've come back to the site. Then we get into visitor sessions, and of course, this is just how many times your website was used. How many people have come multiple times as opposed to how many people just came once. And so you can dig into the data a little bit there and find out how many people are return visitors, how often do they return within a specific time, and continue to grow from there. Then, especially what SES is all about, is where are people coming from? Where is our search traffic coming from? How much of my traffic is based on search engines? What are they typing in? What do they want? And so that's where we come up with the search engine referral rate. And this shows how well your website is growing in getting people who are searching for what you want, what you have. And that's where we get into helping people understand that you can't brand the market. You've got to meet people where they are. You've got to use the same language that they're using. And so when we come up with an average search engine referral rate of 12 to 14%, that's usually based on a site that is focused on their branding. They've not really built out the pages the way that would be conducive for a visitor to understand where they're at. They're not using words that searchers would use in order to be attracted to that site. And so we find when we do optimize the site, search engine referral rates go up, but it's simply based on using the words that people use. And believe it or not, that is still an eye-opening subject right there of just figuring out what are the types of words that your customers would use. And people are still struggling with that in order to communicate that on their pages. The exit rate or the bounce rate, the amount of people that hit your site and then immediately leave. These are the ones that we struggle to understand. What were they looking for when they came to the website? Why did they only stay for 5 seconds and then completely leave? What is it about this? And this is where you can really start to get in and analyze your site and get some great insight as to, are you meeting the customer's needs? Are you providing the information they want on the site? Because if you're not, they're going to leave immediately. One of the best examples of this is I had a client who told me that they wanted to rank #1 for the term UPS. Problem was they weren't UPS. They sold the uninterruptible power supplies, and so they wanted to rank #1 for UPS. The problem was as we started digging in and finding out more about their sales cycle and who they were and what they wanted, that the UPS units were actually not even a profitable business. They weren't even the major part of the company. They only wanted to rank #1 for ego reasons. And so when we started doing some analysis, we found out that people that searched for UPS, came to their site, had a 90% bounce rate within 5 seconds off the homepage. And that's because they dedicated 0 homepage space to UPS units. There was absolutely nothing about UPS on the homepage. So when someone searched for it, got to the page, and there's nothing there, they left. So your message has to be coordinated across all channels. If you want to rank for something, you need to give someone a reason to be there when they get there. If they don't see it, they're going to leave. And this is where bounce rate or exit rate is just a fantastic metric to just really chew on, get into, and find out what's going on the site. And then obviously the conversion rate. The conversion rate is whatever you want it to be. Whatever you want someone to do on your site, that's your conversion rate. You can have 10 conversion rates, you can have 1 conversion rate. Ultimately, it comes down to what do you want someone to do on your site? And are they taking that? It can be downloads, bookmarks, contact forms, information requests, orders, purchases, whatever you want. And then what we ask people to do is to sit down and create 2 goals for your website. There's 2 questions you need to answer if you have a website. The #1 question is, why do I have a website? And amazingly, I get blank stares at that question. Why do you even have a website? Yes, why do you even have a corporate website? What are you trying to accomplish with that? And then the second question is, what do you want people to do when they get there? What do you want people to do? Those two questions will then help you understand, well, this is how I should design the site. This will help me answer the questions of, do I put something here? Do I leave it for later? It helps you in the design, the formation, the content development. When you measure everything by those two questions, then everything becomes clear of why you have the site and who you're making the site for. And that ultimately leads to increasing your conversion rate. And that's really what we preach, is focusing on the conversion rate, continuing to grow it, and finding ways of improving that, looking at the different things that people have to do once they get to this site. Great example of this is Amazon.com, that if I were to go there and buy a book, that is what we call the macro action. That's the number one thing to do on Amazon, is to buy a book. However, that number one thing requires about 26 steps. In a usability test, these are the steps that people have to go through, that every time they make a selection, they have to locate and click the next option. Locate and click. Every time you are asking someone to pause and find the next step, that's a micro action within the overall process. And so what we're doing is finding that it's not really a smooth funnel, it's a funnel that's full of holes. Because as soon as we start blocking people or they can't find the next step, we've inhibited their progress. And so we need to find out which of these steps are a problem. Where are people struggling? And then we plug the hole in the funnel and allow them to continue going through. But just doing that, really what we learn from this is analytics is not so much about numbers as it is understanding the customer experience. Understanding the experience that people are having on your site is really what we draw from analytics. It's not all about numbers and visitors and things like that. It's about understanding where the obstacles are that we're placing in front of people as they come to the site. And so understanding this, we want to delve more into understanding behavior. What are people looking for? How can we make this better? And so what a business has to decide is, are we going to make this leap into analytics? Because if they don't make the leap into analytics, all they're doing is reporting. And by reporting, they're just grabbing the numbers out of the dashboard, putting them on a report, and then sending them up the ladder to whoever wants to see them. And that's what a lot of companies are locked into. There are so many companies, I probably talk to one a week, where all they do is take the numbers off their dashboard, put it in a report, and then they spend the rest of the week or the rest of the month justifying why their visitor numbers are higher or lower than the previous month. And when you're locked into reporting, that's about as deep as you get. And unfortunately, many of those people that are trying to justify why the numbers are higher or lower, they don't have access to any of the other marketing data. There could have been a mailing that went out. There could have been another customer contact that went on. They don't know. All they have is the analytics numbers, and they're really kept in the dark. So if you're getting into an analytics strategy, what that is going to require of you is that you do much more work, that you ask many more questions, that you dig into the data and find out what's going on. Most companies, as I said, are tied up in consistently reporting the same things month after month after month. Page views, path analysis, top 10 keywords, hits. I still see companies using hits as a metric of reporting how successful their site has been. Monthly visitors, top 10 pages. These types of things are what I call caveman analytics. It's the exact same things that we were reporting back in the 90s when we thought that sites were successful because they had a lot of hits or a lot of visitors, but it doesn't go any deeper. It's just reporting. It's so 90s that we've got to break out of this and leave this behind. I go to companies, they show me these things, and they're asking me, well, why aren't we getting anything out of this? Well, when you look at numbers like that, it doesn't tell you anything. I really don't care what the page views are. I don't care what your top 10 keywords are. I don't give a rat's ass about those types of reports because they're not going to tell you anything about improving your site. They don't give you any data. You've got to dig in. You've got to figure out what's going on. Eric Peterson got to the heart of the matter in his book, Web Analytics Demystified, that web analytics works best when measurement expectations are clearly defined in advance. The problem is we've got thousands of web analysts out there that are trying to justify their job with no clear goal for their job. They're not sure what the organization's goals are. They're not sure what the visitor's goals are. And so they're trying to report based on some ethereal goal that nobody knows. And so when you don't have a goal to report towards, you have no direction. Really gets as simple as that. Socrates said the same thing, that the unanalyzed website is not worth hosting. So, figure out your goals. What's the one thing that I want people to do? And if they don't do that one thing, then what? What are the actions we want people to take? What are the things that we want to measure? What do we want people to do? If they don't make that number one conversion, what's the second conversion? And then the third question that I have to ask companies is about their data integrity. Nobody is using just one analytics product. Everyone is using a combination of Omniture, Google Analytics, Lyris, Omniture, and Web Trends, and everyone is using 2 or 3 data packages for their analytics. And the problem comes that there are many companies, or many analysts, I should say, that usually will find the highest number out of one of the packages and use that for their report that month. That's a lack of data integrity, because you can't just take what's the best number from the best analytics package that month and report on that. There's a lot of things that people use in order to make their jobs look great. And unfortunately, that is one of the primary areas where I see some people taking liberties. So ultimately, what we have, yes?
What is the driver for installing multiple packages? Because they do require engineering work to install each one of them. And some of them aren't free either. What do you see out there? Why?
Many different reasons. I find, the primary reason, someone with a Web Trends product, that they don't want to pay for the upgrade, so they install Google Analytics because it's free. And really, the people I've talked to about that, they're getting more information out of Google Analytics for free than they're getting out of their Web Trends. It allows a little more flexibility. With Web Trends, you can't really play with the data like you can in a Google Analytics. I know myself, I use probably 4 different packages, but I have one specifically that I use to dig in and do what I call thin slicing different segments so that we can focus in on a group of people that was looking for red used cars. So we can look specifically at that. Where'd they come from? Where'd they go? Did they do these things? Really what I call more of the forensics of analytics. It's just a lot of it, as soon as Google Analytics came out, because it's there, people went ahead and did it. So a lot of it is just, and that's what leads to the confusion then, is that, well, these numbers don't match these numbers. And really it just keeps confusing the matter all that much more. So the first thing we need to do is have our goals intact. Understand specifically what do we want to accomplish. Because if we don't have what we want to accomplish verbalized, if the people doing the analysis don't understand what it is we want to accomplish, then we're not going to have success. We're not going to have anything to measure by. So we need to move beyond that. And this is where I make the differentiation of Analytics 1.0 and Analytics 2.0. Analytics 2.0 is asking questions. It's not just looking at the charts and graphs that you see in a dashboard. It's being able to ask questions of the data in order to get the information that we want. Neil Postman, a fantastic cultural critic, used to teach at NYU, said that question asking is the most significant tool human beings have, and it's also the most underutilized. It's the most undertaught tool. And my main message to people who are using analytics packages is that no analytics package, when you open it up, when you look at the dashboard, is going to tell you, here's the 2 things you need to do today to improve your website. Change this page, and do this on those pages. No analytics program will ever tell you those things. You are the only one that can figure that out by asking questions. So it gets down to the 3 C's of analytics. which is context, comparison, and contrast. If you really want understanding of what people are doing on your site, if you really want to understand how you can improve it, the first thing we need to do is build context. We need to build context in order to tell a story and understand the motivations of the people that were coming to the site. Then we can compare each of those stories one to another to find out, well, this group was successful, this group wasn't. What were the factors that led to success? What were the factors that led to failure? And this is humanly how we learn. We do this every day. We compare and contrast constantly all throughout the day, but yet as soon as we open up our analytics package, we stop because we see charts and graphs that tell us what we should think. And so we need to get back in and ask questions. This is what I call Socratic analytics. Socrates questioned people. He questioned people in order to make them question what they believed and why they believed it. Ultimately, what that means is getting beyond the, well, we've always done it this way. When you start questioning and finding out, why are we doing this? How is that being done right? Are there other ways that we've explored? And just continue to ask those questions. Really, my feeling is that the analyst should be the most subversive person in the organization because they should always be asking why. So what we want to find out, what are some actions that people take on our site that lead to revenue? What are actions that people take that lead to branding, that lead to success? And then also, I get this question constantly. What's a bad bounce rate for the home page? What's a bad exit rate? What's a good exit rate? And the problem is, you can't answer that question. Someone says, I have a 20% exit rate. Is that good or bad? I don't know. The problem is, we're assuming that everyone that goes to the home page is there for the same exact reason. And once we assume that, we've lost all context of the website. So we have to understand that many people come to the home page or to the website in general with all these different motivations. They're looking for different things. They have different ideas. And so what we have to do in order to answer that question is find out, well, who's coming to the site? What were they looking for? Because once you start asking those questions, you realize that the aggregate data does not give you the information you need to make improvements. Aggregate data assumes that we're all moving from point A to point Z in exactly the same direction using exactly the same path. And that just doesn't happen on the internet. So what we want to do is start breaking this out and we start analyzing our homepage. Well, let's look by who got there. How did they get there? If they came from a different website, what did that website say about our website? What was the link all about? What was the context of the link? Because by that, then, we can understand what did they expect to see when they came to the homepage. If they came from a search phrase, that's a great way of finding out what were they thinking, what did they want in order to come to the homepage. By product group, by campaign, we start looking at all of these different segments and understanding now that if there is a high exit rate or a high bounce rate in any one of these areas, it's because of what they were expecting to find. So we can't aggregate that and say it's good or bad. We have to slice it up and say, well, we're doing well here, we're doing poorly here, and understanding that we're not meeting the needs of a certain segment. I love talking about segmentation because this is where you really learn what's going on a website. And the best way I have of understanding segmentation is, as Christine said, is the analytics according to Captain Kirk. We found this one day, and it was just so mind-boggling that we really wasted the next couple weeks in digging this out here. Because the assumption that everyone has about Star Trek, the original series, is that red shirts die more often. And there's the joke that's constantly, I think if you watch Lost, the joke was, I think in the finale, that all the people that were shot were wearing red shirts. So it carries on in pulp culture. And we had the assumption that more red shirts die than anybody else. So we set about to prove it. We started looking at the data. We want to find out, how did Ensign Ricky go from standing up to laying down dead? And so we have to build context. Let's build context first. We start out with the Starship Enterprise, has a crew of 450 people. We know that's true because it's from StarTrek.org. 5-year mission, 54 deaths, and that results in a 13.7% mortality rate, or for what we're going to call it, our conversion rate. All right? Now, we got our basic information. Our basic information is we have 54 deaths out of 450 people, 13.7%. That's aggregate, okay? This is like looking at unique visitors, search referrals, conversion rate. We don't have yet any specific understanding of why those numbers are like that. We're just looking at the aggregate data as a whole. So we need to start slicing it up. Out of the 54 deaths, what we know is 11% were wearing yellow shirts, 9% blue shirts, 79% were wearing red shirts. So now, on our initial segmentation slice, it's proven red shirts die more often. However, it doesn't tell the story. It doesn't tell us why. And we can't be satisfied with just getting the answer to the question, because if we own our own website and we're trying to get more sales, we want to increase the conversion rate. So we need to know why. So we need to segment the segment. We need to dig further in. So let's look a little bit more about our red shirt activity. Well, we found out that red shirts on board die at a rate of 42.5%, usually from fighting Klingons or something like that on a base or on the ship or anything like that. However, 57.5% of the time, they died when beaming down to the planet's surface with Captain Kirk. So we found the #1 cause of red shirt deaths, which was beaming down to the planet and meeting whatever was down there. 57.5% of the time, we knew that was going to happen. Now, we also thin sliced it to get a little bit more data as far as what was going on, that over 80 episodes, there were 130 fights. 18 of those 130 fights equaled someone dying as a result. 13 of the 18 deaths wearing red shirts. So it just continues. The trend shows that these red shirts are just dropping at an incredible rate. Also, what we found is that half the time, red shirts die in multiples. So by all means, you're better off being a loner and staying on board. And that's really what we want people to be able to pull from this, is that the more data we dump into this, the more we slice into what's going on with red shirts, the more intelligence we're getting, the more understanding, the more context we're getting about why these numbers are so high. But now, how do we get those numbers down? It works the other way too. What we found is when Captain Kirk meets an alien woman, the red shirt death rate drops to 16%. So, and we can get into this, only though 30% of the time does he meet alien women. Green alien women seem to be the best. No one died in those episodes. If they weren't green, then just alien. We had a couple of deaths, and if not green or alien, then yes, Yeoman Rand did quite well. But we found here, and we got all the nice little data here. So red shirt death episodes 18, episodes with fight 55, and we just sliced this all the way down. But what we found is if you want to increase the red shirt conversion rate, you beam down to more planets. If you want to decrease the red shirt conversion rate, go to more planets with peaceful alien women. Captain Kirk was doing what he could to save his crew. That was our conclusion here. But what you can take from this is only by slicing the data down, only by digging into a specific segment and asking questions, why did this happen? What factors affected it? We now can take from this and understand, well, here's what we can do to improve it. And this ultimately is what we apply to websites. We find a specific segment, we start slicing it down. How did they get there? What were they looking for? Did they look at this page? What did they do after seeing this page? Is this a stumbling block? And by only looking at one specific group, a segment of a segment, we begin to understand what they're looking for. And then we can make improvements to the site, because we can also then compare that to another slice of a segment and see where we're doing well, where we need improvement, where we need to fix some things. So this is now enlightenment, that there is usually a 53% probability of a red shirt death. If a fight breaks out, 14% of the time they're going to die. However, when an alien woman gets into the mix, it drops all the way down to 12%. So we begin to get now predictive analytics. And then also, what we realize is an Excel is a pretty good way of distributing data and understanding the relationships between the episodes here. That a lot of this information we could have only gotten by charting it out on Excel, and you can see where the red shirts and how they relate to Captain Kirk's smiling face, which I'm sure you know what that means. But we can now get into predictive analytics. Once we start understanding the trends and how things work together, we can start to understand that, well, if so many people are coming to our site for this specific thing, we know we're going to convert that much there. And if we can increase that, so we start getting more and more into predicting what people are going to do on the site based on how they found it, what they're looking for, where they're going. Doing this is understanding that people are not cattle. People are not cattle because we don't just move in a herd from home page to conversion page to thank you page and then beyond. We don't move all in the same pattern. When you look at the aggregate data, just the unique visitors, page views, things like that, what we're saying is people are moving and they're all looking for the same thing. There's no difference between them. And so we have to slice that down and understand that people aren't cattle. Just to bring this around into a practical website application, let's say we have an electronics website, someone is coming looking for a digital camera. Well, we can have an overall conversion rate that our website is converting at maybe at 2%. However, we can slice it and say, okay, our digital camera buyers, they're converting at 5%. But still, that doesn't tell the whole story. Because some people are looking for digital camera reviews, digital camera comparisons. Some are further along in the buying process and they're looking for pricing. So we can't even treat our digital camera searchers the same way. We've got to slice up the segment there as well, understanding that even if they were using the same keyword, they might be looking for very different things. So we also have to look at where do they enter, where do they go, and then also looking at what I call the keyword bucket of terms. That first we segment out anyone who is looking for digital camera. Then we segment out digital camera and pricing because they're further along in the process. They might be ready to buy. We should have a very different conversion rate for them as anybody else. Same thing, if someone comes to the same website looking for a game system, we can't assume that they're going to act the same way. We can't assume they're going to see the same pages. And so we must look at them differently. We cannot have one conversion rate. We've got to have multiple conversion rates. And only by building the context, now you can begin to compare all of your segments and understanding who's doing what and why. Because our review searchers are going to behave much differently than those who are further along in the buying process that are looking for a specific price or brand guide. So we need to build context. Now, going beyond analytics and understanding how this applies, what I have to tell people is that just simply opening up your dashboard, and if you get confused, don't worry. You're supposed to be. Because the first thing we have to understand is that something like this is just data. It's just a number that's associated to a definition. We can't do anything with this. This is the heart of reporting. The heart of reporting is taking the same number every month and maybe expecting something to change. It's just data. We can't do anything with that. Now, when we add more context, we add some more data to it. We now have 3 different data points here: visitors, page views, and an average. It's still just data. It's still information. We can't take anything with this. We can't apply it to make anything better. It just is what it is. Now, when we start adding more and more data points, start adding more and more context by building out, then we can say people who searched for this, entered at this page, stayed on the site for this long, converted at a rate. Now we have knowledge. The more data points we've added, the more knowledge we have about the motivation of the searcher and what they were looking for, and did they find it, and how did we convert them? Because we're adding more data into it instead of taking data out. Edward Tufte is a wonderful, wonderful author and probably the foremost expert in the visual display of data. And I love his instructions, which is if a chart is confusing, add more information. Charts are confusing because they don't have enough information. You need more data points in order to understand the complex relationships that are going on behind the scenes. So we have our information hierarchy here. It starts with data. Add a little more context, you have information. Add a little bit more, you have knowledge. And that ultimately is where an analytics program will take you, is to the knowledge level. It provides the context. It gives you that visitor knowledge of what's going on. But then we have one more level to go, which is, I need to understand this. How do I apply it? Now that I have the knowledge about this, then we need to make decisions regarding improving the website. And that's what understanding is all about. And then beyond understanding, which is knowing what to do, wisdom is knowing when to do it and how to implement it. The difference here is the analytics program will only get you to the knowledge level. It's the analyst that will take you to the understanding level and the implementation level and the improvement. And that is where analytics can only go so far, and it depends on our ability to ask questions. Because our ability to ask questions is what's going to take us beyond the knowledge level and into the understanding and wisdom of how to apply this and make things better. Just some quick things. These are 7 reports that I tell people are the first place to start if they've not done analytics before. And the first thing is just segment your keywords. Do some what I call keyword buckets. An example of that is, well, we start with, if we have a car site, Ford goes in one bucket, Chevy goes in another bucket, Toyota goes in another bucket. Then we segment the segment. What keywords were they looking for with Ford? And so we have a bunch of little buckets there beyond that. But start by segmenting out why people came to your site. What were they looking for? Find those motivations. Then we segment out by referring URLs. Your people that find your site from a link from another website don't act the same way as search visitors. They're expecting much different information. They're looking for other things. They got what essentially was a word-of-mouth referral by clicking on a link to go to this site. So they're going to act differently. They're going to stay longer. They're typically going to convert at a much higher rate because that was a word-of-mouth referral. Also, segment by bounce rates. Who's bouncing out of your homepage? What did they expect to see? And when you start by segmenting the bounce rates, then you've got a much clearer idea of why someone is leaving your page. And then segment by content. What are people seeing? What content drives people to go further into the site? Which content drives a higher conversion rate? We worked with one company where it was travel-based, and we found out that when people watched videos, they ended up converting at 10 times a higher rate than people that didn't watch videos. So obviously, that was content that drove a conversion. So more of that content. That was the assumption. We put more videos on there, more things like that will drive the conversion rate up. And it's exactly what happened. Giving people more of what they wanted, immersing them in the site allowed us to increase that. But it was only by segmenting based on the content and looking for what was driving the conversion. And then also, and this is something I stole from Avinash, but I am giving him credit, sometimes it's simply changing the words that you use when you report the information. Going from, instead of less than 1 page, 3 pages or less, let's call them abandoners, flirters, browsers. Sometimes just changing the words to words that we all understand rather than using the geek speak that sometimes when you get that across someone with an O in their title, they just don't get it. But if we put it in their language, all of a sudden they understand it that much more. And then when we associate the segments, the first reports are all about breaking up segments. The 6th report is all about bringing it together and trying to build that context. Here's one where we found specifically that someone was trying to rank for a very targeted term, and we found out for one of those terms that they had almost a 85% bounce rate. Well, we found out that people were entering off an old search result onto their Error 404 page, which wasn't customized, so it was just that blank white page not found. Someone there in IT department had taken down the page that was ranking for their second targeted keyword. And they only would have found that by slicing the data and slicing based on search behavior. And we can also be able to find those great relationships that just based on where people enter the site, we can increase the conversion rate by giving them more of the information that they want. So ultimately, what we tell people to do is you've got to tell the story. Build the context by breaking down the data and finding out more and more of what's going on. It's going to help give you more information to tell a story of what's going on behind the scenes, and that's what's going to give you the information you need to get changes and improve the website. And finally, do something about it. Forrester Research said that bringing on a full-time analyst results in an ROI between 900 and 1,200%, simply because of how much information they can find and change and improve. So really, the information isn't worth anything unless you take action and make it happen. Thank you very much for having me here. It was a real pleasure to be here, and it's been great. You can find more information. I do have a blog out here. It's not really so much a personal blog as it is an education blog geared towards educating marketing managers and businesses. And again, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here.
When you're dealing with folks who are just starting to get into analyzing their websites, and they're thinking about these page rates, like page views and hits, and they're entrenched, and they just really open up that confusion, what is the first thing you tell someone to look at to get them, get their mind just off of reporting and onto analysis?
Wow. The first thing, well, it's more of I tell them what not to look at. What I tell them not to look at is their top 10 keywords. That seems to be a report that's in every analytics package, is the top 10 referring keywords. And really, when you go beyond there, and that's what gets to the whole long tail effect and the long tail of keywords, is that it doesn't tell even close to the whole story. Only 10 keywords, which are top referring keywords, really tells a very non-accurate story. And so what I tell people is don't even look at those. I mean, you want to look at your keywords in groups of hundreds or something like that, just to get a feel for what are people searching for. Because what's in your top 10 is not even close to what's actually on your site for data. So it's more of what not to look at. And actually, people kind of feel good about that. They like to know that they can ignore something. It's pretty liberating. Yes?
So what's the ideal academic and professional background of an analyst in your experience?
Wow. They come from really all backgrounds. I found some really great analysts that have music backgrounds. I think it's because they can see patterns in data and understand how to apply it and pull out the information. I mean, my background is in journalism, and I took a lot of marketing, and it just never made sense until I started getting involved online and in web analytics. And all of a sudden, everything I learned in marketing just, wow, now it makes sense. So a lot of it, I think it's, I don't know, I think it's genetic. Just like watching the Olympics, there are some people that have the genes to run. I don't run. I don't like running. Part of me thinks that analytics has some sort of genetic feel to it, that you can just see the patterns and really grasp them. Not to say that you can't do that. You can train yourself, you can work at it, and it really, but I think a lot of it just, sometimes there's just that natural adaptation to the data.
Question about tools. You mentioned that to get from reporting to analysis, you need to dig in and compare things and so on. Do you think that future tools will ever do that? For example, instead of displaying top 10 keywords, display the buckets and so on?
One tool is doing that right almost off the dashboard, and that is the Visual Sciences, where it is creating these keyword buckets, so to speak, on the fly. And they're showing them relationally. Those circle charts where you click on a circle and then everything moves around to show all the related, they're doing that. So what they're doing is looking and saying, okay, here are all the forward keywords. And so you've got the number there, and then you can see that here are smaller circles, and really they're naturally just pulling that out. And so you click on forward, and then that circle breaks apart, and you can see then relationally, what keywords then are the next biggest clumps, so to speak. That was probably one of the greatest examples I've seen. The only problem is it's not, I think it's close to $500,000 or something like that for the program. So it's not, on most people's list there. But I would love to see more of that coming in, where the emphasis is not on the analyst to go look at hundreds of lists of keywords and try and pull out all those homogeneous groups, but to have something that would just naturally look for the common patterns and create a visual display there. I would love to see that happen, and I think that is on its way.
You mentioned that asking the right questions is a huge part of getting the right data. But sometimes that's a really difficult task on its own. Do you have any advice that you give your clients on how to ask the right questions, or any stories from how finally getting the right questions sort of turned it around for them?
Usually I find that when you get in to start segmenting, and what I tell people who want to be analysts is you need 5 things if you want to be an analyst. The first is dual monitors or triple monitors, depending upon how serious you are. The second thing is a door. Door, no coffee, no distractions. The third is a notepad, because when you're getting into the data and you're digging down within a segment, you're always going to have other things come up that, oh, that's something I need to examine more. A lot of good programs, I'm a big fan of the Lyris product, what used to be ClickTracks, because whenever I was digging into one segment, I would see information off to the side there that led me to really see another pattern. And so you got to write it down and stay focused on where you're at and then go back to it. Good analytics products allow you to see things that you may not have been looking for, but it shows it in a pattern that helps you say, well, what about that? And you start going down a whole different path, and it allows you to answer questions you may not have had. And so that is really vitally important, I think, in analytics programs as they continue to be grown and developed, is the ability to go down and really deeply slice, but then all of a sudden see, oh, that's cool. I want to see more about that, and click through and see that. Does that answer your question at all?
It gets into a little bit of questions. Do you have any stories?
Well, yeah. I mean, actually, I'll go back to this slide here and show you a little bit more about what we found. The first paragraph here, the primary keyword is really what we called our bucket term. This was the primary phrase that we were targeting. And what we found, we just looked at some basic data that they're on the site almost 3 minutes. They converted at a rate of around 2.2%. Now, what we found here, though, is when we looked at, well, where are they entering the website? And this was one of those things that as we were getting the initial data, what we saw in another chart nearby was people who searched for this term entered at these pages. So what we found is that about half of the visitors with that key phrase entered at the home page, and the next about 35% entered at a category page deeper in the site. Now, the home page, the people that entered at the home page only had a 1.8% conversion rate. The people that entered at the product page had a 4.3% conversion rate. So right away, it was one of those moments where, okay, if people are bypassing the home page, going right to the product page, we're doubling our conversion rate. So what we took from that is we took all the optimization off the home page. We don't want people to enter at the home page because they're more effective going right to the product page and seeing what they want. And in doing so, what we ended up doing is not only did we increase the conversion rate, but also the people entering at the category page, that conversion rate went up because we focused more attention on getting people through the process there. So that was really about 3 or 4 things that came out as we were watching this segment to find out what was going on, what if they came in here? How many people came in at the product page and then went back to the home page? And we saw that very few were doing that. So it's one of those things that just as we kept digging into it, we kept applying, well, another data point. What about people that did this? And like I said, it just continues to build that context and that understanding of people, they're pretty driven for that key phrase. They know what they're looking for, and really they're almost self-qualified. Found the same thing here whenever we associated brand name with the keyword. So the bottom one there is whenever the brand name was associated with the keyword, conversion rate was 5.3%, but also if they entered at the product category page, it went up even further. So it just reinforced that whole assumption that if they bypass the home page and go enter the site at the product page, they went up significantly. So it's really building these associations that are just so critical to understanding, and that's, I know Avinash, his mantra is segment or die. So that's one of the things I'm waiting to see from Google Analytics is I want to see more segmentation. Anyone else? Thank you very much for your time. I really appreciate the invitation to be here.